My name is Emily, and up until about a year back, I genuinely believed my folks had my back. Or at the very least, I figured they cared enough to give me a fair shake. Thinking about it now, I'm not sure if I was just being incredibly optimistic, or if I'd been turning a blind eye to things my entire life. Because if I'd really been observant, I would have noticed it sooner. Jessica was perpetually their number one. She was the star of the show, the one who never messed up. The one whose joy seemed to matter way more than anyone else's. And I was kind of an extra, the kid sister who was expected to just roll with it, to be cool with getting the short end of the stick, to accept being second best. And for a good chunk of time I did just that. I basically grew up living in Jessica's shadow. Whenever she wanted something, boom, she had it. It's not that I was envious or anything. I'd figured out pretty early on that this was just how things rolled. If I ever asked for something, I'd usually get a maybe, or a we'll think about it. If she asked, it was an instant sure thing. But I never imagined they'd actually swipe something that belonged to me. My college savings had been started when I was little. I don't recall all the specifics, just that my grandparents had chipped in some cash for my schooling. And my parents had always sworn up and down that when the day arrived, I wouldn't have a thing to fret about. It's not a king's ransom, my dad had mentioned when I was in high school, but it'll definitely see you through. I never second-guessed it. Never bothered to find out the actual balance. Never lost a wink of sleep over it. And then, out of the blue one night, everything went sideways. I can picture that evening like it was yesterday. I was parked at the dinner table, double-checking some last-minute stuff for my college applications. My acceptance letters were already in, and I was trying to figure out which school to pick. It was a thrilling kind of anxiety, the type that felt like the start of something huge. My parents were hanging out in the kitchen, whispering back and forth. I wasn't really tuned in at first, too busy staring at my laptop. But then I caught my sister's name. Jessica had gotten engaged a couple of months before, and the wedding prep had been going full throttle. Every single conversation in our place was about color palettes, food choices, possible venues, and who to invite. It was seriously draining. Initially, I assumed they were just hashing out more wedding stuff. But something in my mom's voice made me pause my typing. I wasn't quite sure why, but I suddenly felt this strong need to eavesdrop. Fully taken care of, she was mentioning. The place itself was almost 25 grand. My dad let out a heavy breath. It's a special occasion, I know, she responded, and I want everything to be flawless for her. She deserves nothing less. There was a beat of silence. Then my dad's voice got quieter this round. You handled the remaining stuff, yeah? My mom kind of paused. It's sorted. And what about Emily? My gut twisted when I heard my name. She'll manage, my mom replied, her voice breezy, almost like she couldn't care less. She can apply for student loans. I was completely stunned. For a split second, I was convinced I'd misheard. Student loans. I spun around in my chair, my heart racing as I gazed at them. What exactly are you implying? They both glanced up, looking startled. I hadn't intended to shout it so loudly, but the words had just burst out, sharp and full of disbelief. My mom gave me this tiny fake smile, like she was trying to calm down a toddler. Oh honey, there's nothing to fret about. I shoved my chair back, getting to my feet. Don't fret about what? My dad exhaled deeply. Emily, please sit. I stayed put. Instead, I inched closer, my thoughts spinning. What did you mean by saying I could get student loans? My mom and dad exchanged a quick glance, and I could sense they were trying to figure out how much to reveal, how much they could possibly hide. Felt nauseous. Finally, my mom sighed softly, like this was a chat she really didn't want to be having. We had to shuffle some funds, she explained, to ensure everything was sorted for the wedding. I just stared at her. What funds? I questioned, even though I already had a sinking feeling I knew. He paused again. Then finally, in the same nonchalant way someone might inform you they were out of bread, she dropped the bomb. We dipped into your college savings. My ears started buzzing. I tried to say something, but nothing came out. I glanced at my dad, desperately hoping, wishing that he'd speak up, that he'd tell me she was mistaken. He didn't. Instead, he just sighed once more, massaging his temples like I was the one causing a scene. Emily, don't blow this out of proportion. Blow this out of proportion. I let out a harsh, sarcastic chuckle. You raided my college fund for Jessica's wedding, and you think I'm overreacting? My mom frowned, looking genuinely puzzled. Well, yeah, you can simply get loans, Emily. College isn't disappearing anytime soon. I clutched the edge of the table. That cash was intended for my schooling. And you'll still receive an education, she responded patiently, like I was being a difficult kid. Tons of folks take out student loans. It's pretty standard. I could feel my hands trembling. It was my money. It was our family's money, my dad corrected. And we had to prioritize. I shook my head, struggling to wrap my head around this. Prioritize. Between my long-term goals and a single party. Emily, my mom sighed, clearly annoyed now. It's not merely a party. It's Jessica's wedding. It's one of the most significant days in her entire life. We couldn't possibly give her a half-baked celebration. I felt like I was about to be sick. My entire life, I'd been aware that Jessica was their golden child. But this was a whole different level. This was them showing me, crystal clear, that her single day was worth more than my entire future. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice from shaking. And you weren't even planning on informing me? We were going to have a proper discussion with you, my dad claimed, like that somehow made things better. We simply hadn't found the right moment yet. I clenched my teeth. Jessica picked that exact instant to stroll into the kitchen, casually humming. She paused when she noticed me, her gaze darting between me and our parents. Hey, what's the drama? I turned to face her, and all of a sudden, the fury inside me had a clear target. You were in on this, weren't you? I questioned, my voice dangerously low. Jessica blinked. Knew what exactly? That they were raiding my college savings to cover your wedding expenses? She hesitated, just for a split second. Then she gave a careless shrug. Mom and Dad mentioned it was cool. They assured me you'd be all right. My entire body turned to ice. She didn't even bat an eye. I'd always pegged Jessica as a bit self-centered, but I never imagined she could be this uncaring. You didn't even consider consulting me, I whispered. Didn't bother to check if I was okay with any of it. She frowned. Emily, seriously, why are you turning this into such a massive deal? I laughed. I genuinely couldn't help but laugh. Because it is a massive deal, I snapped. That money was supposed to secure my future. And you just, I gestured wildly, my voice getting louder, helped yourself to it. Jessica rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, for crying out loud. Are you seriously going to throw a fit about this? I felt my heart break into a million pieces. I glanced at my parents. And you're genuinely okay with all of this? My mom offered me a tiny patronizing smile. Honey, you'll get it once you're a bit older. I stared at them, my chest heaving with each breath. Then, without another word, I turned and stormed out the front door. I don't recall getting into my vehicle. I don't remember starting the engine or reversing out of the driveway. All I can recall is how my hands were shaking on the steering wheel, how my vision got blurry as I fought back tears. I drove aimlessly. My thoughts kept replaying the conversation on repeat, each word cutting like a knife. You'll get it once you're a bit older. Why are you turning this into such a massive deal? It was our family's money. I ended up in an empty parking lot and just sat there. For the first time ever, I felt completely and utterly alone. My folks had picked Jessica again. But this time they hadn't just shown favoritism. They had robbed me of something that was supposed to be mine, something I'd been relying on. And they hadn't even had the decency to inform me to my face. I let my forehead rest against the steering wheel, my breath coming in ragged gasps. This wasn't simply about the cash. It was about the deeper meaning. They didn't appreciate me. They didn't give a damn about my future plans. They didn't even consider me significant enough to deserve a heads up before they made their choice. I'm not sure how long I stayed parked there, but eventually my phone started buzzing. I wiped my face and glanced at the screen. Jessica had texted. Are you seriously still fuming? You're being super extra. I stared at the message. Then slowly I switched off my phone and placed it aside. I had a choice to make. I could head back home. I could cry my eyes out. I could plead with them to change their minds, even though I knew it wouldn't make a difference. Or I could face the reality. I could quit anticipating them to be any different. I could stop holding out hope that they'd ever see me the way I'd always craved. And I could simply walk away. It wasn't a simple choice. But in that instant, sitting alone in my car with the crushing weight of betrayal bearing down on me, I made up my mind. I was going to prioritize myself. I didn't return home that evening. Instead, I crashed at a friend's place, someone who had consistently been there for me in ways my own family never had. She didn't pry too much, just let me sleep on her couch and handed me a blanket. The following morning, I began hunting for work. I wasn't heading to college anymore, at least not anytime soon. I didn't have any funds for it, and I definitely wasn't about to drown myself in debt while my sister pranced into a fairy tale wedding paid for by what was supposed to be my future. So I got a job. Initially, it was just a basic gig at a local coffee shop. Early mornings, crazy long hours, sore feet. But I wasn't just working for a paycheck. I was working with a clear goal in mind. Every free moment, I was soaking up knowledge. I spent my evenings doing research, watching tutorials, jotting down notes. I accidentally discovered the world of online entrepreneurship, side gigs, and making money while you sleep. And for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. I launched a small online venture. At the start, it barely generated any income, just a few bucks here and there. But I stuck with it. While Jessica was busy arranging her dream wedding, I was constructing something tangible. By the time her wedding day rolled around, I wasn't present. I wasn't even on the guest list. Not that I would have shown up anyway. They never bothered to call and ask where I was, never sent a single text to check in. It was as if I'd simply vanished from their lives. And honestly, that was perfectly fine. Because while they were toasting Jessica's big day, I was hustling. I was putting in the long hours. And by the end of that initial year, I'd achieved something I never believed was within reach. I'd raked in $300,000. Fast forward 1 year, and I was chilling in my own apartment, my very own place, when my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something compelled me to answer. I hit the button and held it to my ear. Hello. There was a brief silence. Then, Emily. I instantly recognized that voice. It was my mother. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my legs. Well, didn't anticipate hearing from you. There was an awkward, forced laugh. Well, honey, it's been quite some time. How's life treating you? I smiled to myself. Oh, just grinding away, making ends meet. Another pause. That's wonderful, she replied quickly. That's truly wonderful. Waited. I could sense it brewing. Well, she continued, her voice suddenly much softer. We were actually hoping we could have a chat with you about something. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? Yes, she confirmed, clearing her throat. You see, things have been a tad challenging for us on the financial front lately. There it was. I almost burst out laughing. Oh, really? I repeated, keeping my tone completely neutral. What exactly happened? Well, she hesitated. We had to secure some loans for Jessica's wedding, and things haven't exactly been smooth sailing. Your father and I were just pondering if you might be in a position to lend a hand. Just a bit, until we get back on track. Just until you regain your footing, I finished for her. My voice was calm, but inside I felt a slow, simmering amusement. There was a beat of silence. Yes, she responded, a little too eagerly. Just a small bit of assistance. As a family. Family. The word felt completely alien coming from her. I leaned back, twirling a pen between my fingers. Just out of curiosity, I inquired, keeping my tone casual. But why me? Another pause. I could practically hear the cogs turning in her brain. Well, she finally said, we're aware that you've been doing quite well for yourself. I let that hang in the air for a moment. So they were aware. They'd ghosted me for an entire year. No calls, no texts, not even a casual "how's it going?" But now, all of a sudden, when they were in dire straits, they magically remembered I existed. I could picture it so vividly. Jessica griping about money, my parents wringing their hands. Then someone saying, hold on a second, doesn't Emily have some cash now? Felt like laughing. Instead, I tilted my head, my voice still light. I thought you mentioned I could always apply for student loans. Silence. Waited. Then my mother let out a nervous chuckle. Oh, honey, that was a completely different situation. Was it, though? Questioned, my voice now sharp. Well, yes, she insisted, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. You were young. You had plenty of time to sort things out. We simply assumed. No, I cut her off, my patience wearing thin. You didn't assume. Not about me, at least. There was a noticeable shift in her tone. A bit more forceful now. Emily, please don't act this way. We're still your parents. After everything we've provided for you, this is how you show your gratitude. I laughed. I genuinely couldn't help but laugh. Everything you've provided for me? I echoed, incredulous. You hijacked my college savings. You didn't even bother to inform me directly. I had to stumble upon it like some minor detail. You didn't give a damn about how it would impact me. You didn't even bother to reach out after I left. And now that you're strapped for cash, I'm suddenly your daughter again. That's completely unjust, she retorted sharply. Unjust. Fired back. Unjust would have been offering me a say in the matter. Unjust would have been at least owning up to what you did instead of dismissing it. But you didn't because you didn't care. And now you anticipate me to care about your financial woes. She scoffed, as if I was being utterly ridiculous. Emily, we're your family. We looked after you for years, provided you with a home. And now, when we're in need, you're simply going to abandon us. There it was. The classic guilt trip. I exhaled slowly. I don't owe you a single thing. The words came out softly, firmly, definitively. I beg your pardon, she exclaimed, her voice laced with disbelief. I don't owe you a single thing, I reiterated, my voice unwavering. You made your decision. You prioritized Jessica. You prioritized her wedding over my entire future. You instructed me to get loans if I wanted a college education. So why don't you follow your own advice? There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Then, how dare you? Bingo. My mother's voice had completely lost its fake sweetness. Now she sounded like her true self. Furious, self-entitled, and desperate. After everything we've sacrificed for you, you're just going to watch us drown? I felt a smile creep onto my lips. Yep. You ungrateful little. Hung up. And for the first time in a very, very long while, I felt a sense of liberation. But I should have seen what followed coming a mile away. A week after that delightful phone call, I was enjoying a peaceful Saturday morning in my apartment, sipping on some freshly brewed coffee and scrolling through my phone, when I heard a knock. At first, I figured it was a package delivery or maybe a neighbor dropping by. But when I peeked through the peephole, my stomach did a somersault. Standing outside were my dear parents. And behind them, arms crossed and looking thoroughly annoyed, was none other than Jessica. I took a deep, calming breath, schooling my features into a neutral expression before unlocking the door and opening it just a crack. Emily, my mother began, her voice dripping with fake warmth. Sweetheart, we just wanted to have a little chat. I raised an eyebrow. Really? Because the last time we had a chat, you labeled me ungrateful and slammed the phone down on me. My father cleared his throat, shifting awkwardly. We were a bit emotional, he mumbled, avoiding direct eye contact. Jessica scoffed, arms still firmly crossed. Yeah, well, you were acting like a total brat. I slammed the door shut in their faces. The knocking resumed, harder this time. Emily, my mother snapped. Don't you dare be disrespectful. I flung the door open again, leaning casually against the frame. If you're just here to hurl insults, you can turn right back around. My mother took a deep breath, forcing a tight-lipped smile. We're not here to pick a fight. We simply want to have a face-to-face conversation. Like a proper family. Family. Now they wanted to pretend we were one. I folded my arms. Fine. Spit out whatever you need to say. They exchanged quick glances before my father spoke up. Emily, we're in a tough spot, he admitted, as if that wasn't already glaringly obvious. Things have been rough, and well, we could really use your assistance. I tilted my head. Huh, that's ironic. Because a year ago when I was in a tough spot, you told me I could, and I quote, just get loans. Jessica groaned dramatically. Oh my God, are you seriously still harping on about that? I smiled sweetly. You mean the part where my entire future was snatched away from me so you could have a Pinterest-worthy wedding? Yeah, Jess, I am still harping on about that. Her face turned a shade of crimson. You're being absolutely absurd. You're loaded now, aren't you? It's not like you even required college. Why does it even matter at this point? I let out a low chuckle. Well, you truly don't grasp it, do you? I shook my head, then turned to my parents. You know, I vividly recall when I pleaded with you not to lay a finger on my college fund. You shrugged it off and assured me I'd be fine. You insisted I'd figure things out. My mother stiffened. Emily, that's not entirely. I cut her off, mimicking her tone from that fateful day. Loans are available for a reason. A bit of hardship builds resilience. You're young, you'll recover. Their faces fell. I watched them squirm for a brief moment before continuing, my voice dripping with mock concern. So, why don't you apply for some loans? Why don't you cultivate some resilience? Struggle a little bit. You're not over the hill yet, right? Jessica's face twisted in fury. That's completely unjust. Smirk. Oh, so now you're concerned about fairness. My father sighed heavily. Emily, we are your family. Families support one another. I let that sink in for a beat. Then very calmly I stated, you weren't my family when you pilfered my future. You weren't my family when you excluded me from the wedding. You weren't my family when you ghosted me for an entire year. You only remembered I was family when you were desperate for money. Silence. Jessica clenched her fists. God, you're such a self-centered brat. Shrug. Perhaps. But at least I can afford to be. That was it. That was the final straw. My mother's face contorted in rage, and my father muttered something under his breath, but I couldn't have cared less. I stepped back inside and without another word, I shut the door in their faces. And this time I didn't bother to open it again. Another year went by. I didn't hear a peep from them again. Not directly, at least. I'd receive the occasional passive-aggressive text from distant relatives. Things like, family is forever, Emily. Or, you'll regret abandoning the people who nurtured you. I disregarded them. Because while they were busy wallowing in self-pity, I was flourishing. My business absolutely exploded. What started as a side hustle transformed into a full-blown empire. By the time I hit 23, I wasn't just comfortable. I was a millionaire. And my dear family. Oh, they were sinking fast. It wasn't just the mounting debts. Jessica's marriage, the one they obliterated my future to finance, crumbled within a year. Turns out the perfect wedding doesn't guarantee a perfect marriage. She moved back home, penniless, bitter, and furious at the world. My parents were worse off than ever. My dad's job slashed his hours. My mom's little side venture never gained traction. And with the economy in the state it was, they were struggling to keep their house. And still I heard nothing from them. Until one day I received a text. Mom texted, Emily, please give me a call. It's urgent. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then, purely out of curiosity, I dialed her number. She answered on the very first ring. Emily, she breathed like she'd just been rescued from a sinking ship. Oh, sweetheart. I cut her off. What do you need? Then the sob story commenced. How they were behind on their mortgage payments. How the bills were stacking up. How the stress was tearing their family apart. And then, the real reason she'd reached out. Emily, she said, her voice trembling. We desperately need your help. Smiled. Oh, really? What sort of help? She hesitated, like she was debating whether to be blunt or dance around the issue. Finally, she swallowed her pride. Financial assistance, she confessed. Just something to help us get back on our feet. I almost laughed. A sheer nerve. I leaned back in my chair, twirling a pen between my fingers. So, let me get this straight, I said slowly. You robbed me of my future. You compelled me to struggle. You instructed me to simply get loans. And now, you're looking for a handout. It's not like that, she replied quickly. Emily, we're family. Oh, you mean like how I was family when you hijacked my college fund. Or when you excluded me from the wedding? Or when you ignored me for a solid year? Silence. I let it linger for a moment before sighing dramatically. Well, Mom, I said, loans are available for a reason. Her breath hitched. A little bit of hardship builds resilience, I continued. You're not over the hill yet, right? She started sobbing. Let her. When she finally stammered out, I don't know what we're going to do, I simply smiled and said, you'll figure it out. And then I hung up. I haven't communicated with them since. As I sat there, gazing at my phone screen, I couldn't help but ponder. Was I being excessively harsh?